All right, well, it is 12 p.m. Central Standard. Let's go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Building Buyer Urgency with KW Maps coach Jen Davis. Please note this meeting is being recorded and will be available within 24 hours on the Maps Fast Track YouTube channel. You may access the YouTube channel from your Zoom confirmation email, and we will share the link in the chat momentarily. Currently, everyone is on mute. We do value group participation, so we ask that if you have questions, please type them into the chat box. Your questions will be addressed by your coach throughout your webinar. Following the meeting, if you have any questions about today's call or coaching programs, please email us at fasttrack@kw.com. That's all for me. Jen, take it away.
Thanks, Madeline. I appreciate you. Well, happy afternoon, everyone. I normally do these things in the morning, so I'm a little bit off on timing today, yet this is one of my very favorite topics. So just as an introduction, I am the Vice President of MAPS. I'm also a MAPS one-on-one coach and a Fast Track coach. I started as a buyer's agent. So I was a lead buyer agent for a team in Springfield, Missouri for 6 years, then took over running the team. I built out a showing agent model, and we were selling consistently 225 buyer sides per year from 2016 on. I recently stepped in the role as a vice president of MAPS. I still have a real estate team, and we're still actively showing buyers. So the goal today is for you to take at least one thing that you can immediately implement into your business to help you move your business forward for 2023. The focus of this being building buyer urgency. So the number one thing that we want to take a look at is identifying where your buyer is in the funnel, right? Where is that buyer? What we know is that Gary Keller often talks about when someone hits your funnel, your lead flow, that they're generally 18 to 24 months away from making a purchase. Now, when they enter into your funnel, they also may be entering into other agents' lead funnel, right? If they're looking at one website, they're probably looking at another one. And the number one way that we can start to create buyer urgency is to understand the buyers that we're actively working with. So what I don't want anyone to do is get a new lead, and without identifying where that buyer is in the pipeline, start showing them properties. We've got to make sure that the buyers that we are actively working with, that we're taking time with, that we're meeting with, that we're showing properties to, are actually somewhere between 30 and 60 days out. If they're 18 to 24 months out, that's awesome. We love them. We want to help them. We're in this for the career, right? We're not in this for 1 year. We're in this to build a massive career. So we want to put them on a follow-up plan. Last year was a different year, right? We started the year in one of the strongest real estate markets that we've seen. The market was creating some of the urgency with buyers. Buyers felt like they had to move quickly because homes were selling quickly. In most markets right now, we're starting to see an adjustment, right? There is more inventory. The days on market are getting longer. We're starting to see some price improvements again. And so what we want to make sure is that we don't take our time with buyers that are someday buyers. We want to utilize technology for that. We want to utilize follow-up plans. We want to utilize email. We want to utilize text messaging, right? We want to make sure that we capture the lead, yet we also want to know how to work with that lead. So when I talk with a buyer the first time, what I want to do is I want to just establish rapport with them as quickly as possible. And one of the things that we know through our great MAPS coaches is the person that asks the most questions typically gets to guide the conversation. It's not the person that talks the most, it's the person that asks the most questions. So one of the things that I want to understand is when a buyer, when I speak with them for the first time, one of the ways to identify where they're at in our lead funnel is to understand how many steps have they taken in the process. Have they met with a lender? Are they willing to meet with a lender? Is there anything that they might know about their finances that would prevent them from being able to buy a home right now? And so the way that we ask those questions is just super conversational. A call comes in and you answer and you say, hi, this is Jen Davis with Keller Williams. How are you today? Right? We're just asking questions. I understand that you called in about the property at 123 Main Street. Tell me about that. Tell me what about that property got you excited enough to call me today? Tell me what it is that you're looking for. I'm starting to identify it. Have you met with any other agents? How long have you been looking at properties? Are you actively going to open houses, or right now are you mainly looking online? What we want to understand is with those questions, those are pretty easy questions, and we can start to identify where the motivation is in there. So if a buyer says, oh gosh, I've been looking for 6 months. Okay. What's gone on in the last 6 months that's prevented you from finding the right home for you? What additional information do you need from me in order to help get you into taking a look at this house? I'm going to be able to be asking them questions and seeing, can I move them forward in the funnel? Is it the right time to meet? Or are they still really just looking and I can provide them some information? We can do a phone consultation, and then I can put them in a follow-up plan. One of the other things I want to ask is, do they have a home to sell? So I said earlier, what would prevent them? Is there anything that might prevent them from purchasing a house right now? And what happens is they'll say something like, oh gosh, no, I'm really ready to buy. The only thing is I've got to get my house on the market. I just don't want to do that until, right? So now we know, okay, we've got another step. This is not a right now buyer. This isn't someone that I necessarily need to show right now. So my follow-up question then would be, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, I understand you have a home to sell. Would you just prefer to sell it first, or is that a necessity? Must we sell it first? Or they might say, gosh, Jen, I've got a lease. I've got a lease until May. Cool. Let's talk about what that time frame looks like, and then we're going to back into it. So being really comfortable being on the phone when that lead comes in, or really comfortable in an open house when you meet someone, in just asking questions. It's the number one way that we build rapport. Very few agents ask buyers a lot of questions. And so what we want to demonstrate is we're there for them. Our number one goal is to help them meet their goal. It's not about us. Our opinion doesn't matter. We're there to help the buyer. So when I look at one of the ways that we start to create buyer urgency, I want to understand when I meet with a buyer, are they an aspirin buyer or are they a vitamin buyer? So some of you are kind of chuckling to yourselves because you're like, an aspirin buyer. Some of these buyers I need an aspirin for after I meet with, right? Like I need an aspirin that I need to take after I meet with them. And that's not actually what I mean on this one. An aspirin buyer is someone that must buy to solve a pain point. An aspirin buyer is someone that is typically buying because there's a change in life. There's been a death, there's been a divorce, or they need to downsize. There's a pain point that we can solve. So when I look at solving for an aspirin buyer, those are questions that we want to be very comfortable asking. One of the things that we coach to is we typically aren't going to ask a question that starts with a why. When you ask a why question, sometimes you can get a defensive answer. So the example I would use on that is, if any of you have kids or you have a significant other and you say, why didn't you put the dishes away? Immediately the response is an excuse. The immediate response is there's a pain point or a negative that they feel like they need to combat. If I say to a buyer, well, why do you want to buy now? They feel like they're in a defensive position. So I might say to a buyer to identify, are they an aspirin buyer or a vitamin buyer? Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, what about right now is important to you? How will buying a home in this time frame, how will that impact your family? Tell me more about that. A vitamin buyer is a buyer that's looking for an enhancement. Those are the buyers that are moving because they want to top grade. They maybe want a pool. Maybe they want an extra living space. Maybe they want an extra garage space. Maybe it's a secondary home for them. A vitamin buyer is an enhancement. So some of those questions might be, Mr. or Mrs. Buyer, tell me what it is that you're looking for in your next home. And if they say a pool, Mr. or Mrs. Buyer, what about a pool is important to you? How is it going to impact your lifestyle? And the way that this ties into creating buyer urgency is identifying which path we're going down. Are we giving an enhancement, right? Is that what they're after? Or are we solving a pain? Once we understand which track the buyer is going down, it does kind of determine or help us determine where they are in that funnel that we talked about earlier, right? It does help us identify if someone says, gosh, Jen, I really need to buy a house. My spouse and I just got divorced. I've got to find my next space. What that tells me is there's a sense of urgency that's already there. It also tells me that this person has just gone through a lot, and I may need to tread lightly on a few different things, right? I want to be aware of what's going on with the buyer so I know how to show up. If a buyer is looking for an enhancement and they're looking for that pool, what I want to know is why, right? I'm not going to say why, I'm going to say what, right? How does this impact your family? And then what we're going to do is if they say, gosh, I've got kids and they're at the age where I feel really confident in their swimming and we want to have pool parties and we want to do all these things. I know that in Springfield, Missouri, where I'm located, the pool season is very short, right? We've got really May to September. That's going to help me build in that timeline. It's going to help me build in that motivation. And so we started talking about some conversations to have either way. The number one reason that there are buyer agents that have a lot of success is because they're very comfortable in the conversation. The conversation we learn about in that book, Fierce Conversations. Conversations are the relationship. And what I will tell you is that the quality of the conversation that you're willing to have with a buyer is a direct correlation of your conversion rate. So if you look at the number of buyers that you have, and you look at the number of conversations you've had, and you say, gosh, I meet with a buyer, and yet only half of them sign with me. Half of them sign a buyer agency agreement with me. What would need to change in the conversations that we're willing to have? And I say willing to have because conversations are hard. You have to be intentional. You have to be an active listener. You have to take notes. You have to ask clarifying questions. Bless you, whoever that might have been. Bless you. So you've got to be really comfortable sitting in it with the buyers, right? Digging in deeper. And what I will tell you is when you're willing to have these conversations and the more questions you ask, the more buyers you'll be able to help in the faster amount of time. Buyers look to us to be their fiduciary. They look to us to be the expert. They look to us to help them move through a process that can be very scary. And so when I think we've got somebody that came off mute, Madeline, if you could help me. Chris Tillman asked a question in the chat. Do you mean the type of questions or what questions you're asking? I think it's the quality of the question. It's sitting in the question until you understand it. It's digging in. We talk a lot about in coaching going 3 deep in a conversation. So if I said to Madeline, hey, Madeline, what about that pool is important to you? And she said, gosh, I absolutely love summer. It's important for me to have friends and family over. I'm engaged. I'm excited to get married. I want people to come and visit me, and I want them to swim in our pool. Awesome. How will that impact your summer? I just want to get to the point where we get very narrow on the why behind the pool, So that then if Madeline sends me a house at 123 Main Street that doesn't have a pool, and she sent it to me from, somebody else's app, I can say to Madeline, hey, I don't fully understand this. I thought the pool was one of the most important things. You substitute pool for formal dining room, substitute pool for, you said that you needed to have 4 bedrooms instead of 3. If I don't understand the importance of the search criteria, I actually am going to end up showing Madeline homes that don't meet any of her criteria because I didn't stay within the questions. We want to identify the buyer's timeline. So what do I mean by that? Or future pace, we want to future pace the buyer based on their timeline. So if Madeline and if I'm in a strategy session with Madeline and we're planning out what it is that she needs to have in this perfect house, what are her non-negotiables, what are her wants, what are her needs? What I want to be able to do is say, okay, Madeline, I understand that, you want 4 bedrooms, you want to have a pool, you want to be in there by May for the start of, pool season. When we say that you want to be in there by May, do you mean unpacked by May or unpacking in May? And she'll say, no, I want to be in the house by May. Okay, so we really need to be closing sometime in April. When are you going to host your first pool party? She says, I'm going to Cinco de Mayo, right? I want to have tacos and we want to have margaritas and we're going to have a good time. I'm going to say, awesome. So by Cinco de Mayo, you want to be able to have a pool party. Typically speaking, in our market, it looks for us to be somewhere around a 30 to a 35-day closing period. I'm assuming you don't want to move in on Cinco de Mayo and host a party. Could we say it's probably fair that you might need 2 weeks to get settled? She would say, yeah, or she might say, gosh, no, Jen, I need like 3 weeks to get settled, or I need a month to get settled. Okay, you want a month in your new home before you host a party. So that looks like somewhere around an April 1st closing date. So what that means is we really need to be under contract no later than the beginning of March in order for you to be in the home by April 1st, in order for you to host this pool party. All I'm doing is I'm setting up the timeline for when we're going to start looking at homes. And Madeline's going to say, gosh, Jen, I just want to start looking at houses now. Cool. Are you prepared to buy a home today if we find the right one for you? And if Madeline says, well, no, I've got a lease. My lease isn't up until February. All I'm doing is asking enough questions, and it's all based on her timeline. What I'm not doing, though, is Madeline saying, oh my gosh, Jen, I want to buy a house. It has to have a pool. I'm ready to go look at houses today. And then I start jumping into show mode. Well, what happens is if Madeline can't buy until February or March or whatever that date of her lease is, well, guess what? I'm going to spend the next 2 weeks over the holidays showing Madeline houses that she has no intention of buying. Madeline is going to lose some excitement over the next 2 weeks because she may or may not find that perfect house that she now can't buy. And what happens is by the time Madeline can buy in February, I'm tired of showing Madeline homes. I've spent a lot of time showing her homes that she couldn't buy. So my dollar per hour is low because I'm showing her before she's really ready to buy. That doesn't mean I'm not going to help her now. What I'm going to say is, gosh, Madeline, I'm super excited to get to help you. It sounds like we really need to start looking for properties the middle to end of January. What I found is most of our buyers find a home in the first 2 to 3 that we show them. And so when we're looking at showing you properties for you to be able to make that purchase on your timeline, what I want to make sure is that I am showing you the right properties at the right time that are available when you feel comfortable writing an offer. When I just walked through that, that's how you learn how to comfortably back up that timeline. I just walked her through why it doesn't make sense to make an offer or to start looking at houses right now. However, we also want to be moving buyers forward. So when I say we're building buyer urgency, when we know their end date in mind, right? When you shorten a time frame, it creates urgency. So if Madeline said, oh gosh, Jen, I want to be in this house by Valentine's Day, and I go back through and I walk her all the way back through, guess what happens? Madeline knows we do need to go look today. Her lease is month to month. She's able to get out of it. And she knows that if she really wants to be in a home by X date, that we've got to make a move right now. So when we create urgency, we can create it on either side of it, and we can still protect our time. We want to create that clarity around the timeline so that the buyer stays focused on when they need to be making a decision, because then guess what? We're not putting any pressure on them. All we're doing is helping them facilitate the best decision that they can make for themselves and their family. We also want to help our buyers identify what their motivation is. So we talked about, a couple of slides ago, are they an aspirin buyer? Or are they a vitamin buyer? I typically, when I meet with a buyer, we call it a strategy session. Some people call it a buyer consultation. I look at a strategy session as this is my opportunity to meet with a buyer to place them strategically within the market. My goal is for every buyer to find the best house at the best price in the time frame that works best for them. That's my number one goal. So whether Madeline wants to buy now or she wants to buy late spring, I want for her to self-identify what time frame that is for her, right? So when she and I are talking, I'm going to say to Madeline, I understand that you want to be in a home by the end of that, by the beginning of May, end of April. And I'm going to say, when you look at your sense of urgency, when you look at like how important that time frame is to you, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rank yourself as far as, if I said a buyer that I work with right now, that's a 1, is someone that may or may not ever purchase a home. 10 being they have to buy today. They have to be under contract today. Where in there would you count? Where in there would you rate yourself? And if Madeline says, gosh, then I'm a 7, I'm not a right now buyer. I'm not a 10. I'm not going to buy today. Yet I am motivated, and there's no chance I'm going to miss this deadline. Then I have permission to say to Madeline, hey, Madeline, if something changes, can you just let me know, hey, Jen, I just went from a 7 to a 9. And Madeline's going to say, well, yeah, I can do that. Cool. Because things happen. Things happen between now and April. A landlord decides to sell the house that you're living in. Wouldn't it be helpful if Madeline had a very easy way to communicate with me that her level of motivation changed? It also gives me permission that when I check in on her over the next few months, that I could say, hey, Madeline, are we still sitting at a 7 or are we nearing an 8? Has anything in your life changed that would change that 7 ranking that you initially gave me? Because the opposite can happen. Madeline could sign a lease again because something changed in her job. She could decide to back off, right? Or it can go either way. What we want to do, though, is we don't want to miss an opportunity to help a buyer because we miss their motivation. When I'm doing that strategy session, if there's an hour-long strategy session, I'm going to spend 45 minutes of it identifying timeline, identifying the motivation. Why is she moving? What about that is important to her? How will it impact her family? And then we want to utilize conversation frameworks regarding communication. So what do I mean by a conversation framework? It's basically those role plays that we do, right? Understanding the market that we're in right now, understanding how to communicate with buyers. And one of the things that I look at is there's a conversation framework that we use that just says, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, I want my motivation to match your motivation. If you want to be into a home by the beginning of February, what that means to me is every time a home hits the market that gets close to what it is that you're looking for, that I am going to call, text, email, send a honing pigeon your way to let you know that this house has hit the market. However, If you don't want to move until May, that level of communication might overwhelm you. You might be hearing from me too many times. Where in my communication levels do you see that is a best fit for you? Because I want the buyer to say, yeah, Jen, I want you to tell me, text me, call me, all those things every time you see a home at the market. That's awesome. Now I've learned how to win with Madeline. So Christina in the chat said she likes the idea of a strategy session better. I do too. It seems more proactive than reactive, right? That means we're coming alongside, we're partnering with our buyers to find them the best house at the best price in the shortest amount of time possible. Chris asked a great question. For 7s and up, do you keep weekly or daily meeting with them? For someone that their motivation is a 7 to a 10, I'm going to base that cadence based on I want my motivation to match your motivation. How often would you like for me to communicate with you? If you were to look back on this over the next 60 days and you said, gosh, Jen, you really communicated at a level that was a win for me, what would that be? If that changes, could you let me know? So someone that's a 9 or a 10, I'm communicating with them daily, right? Every day I'm looking for a house for them. I'm probably pre-booking their next appointment. So I look at forward pacing somebody and I look at, we're either going to set somebody or sign somebody. And what I mean by a set or signed is if I show Madeline a home and it doesn't work for her and she's ranked herself an 8, 9, or 10, when that home doesn't work, I'm not saying to Madeline, oh gosh, Madeline, I'm sorry that one didn't work. I'm going to go back to the office, see what I can find. Once something pops up, I'll let you know. If she's an 8, 9, or 10, I'm saying to Madeline, I'm so sorry that one didn't work. I'm going to go back to the office and find you another home to take a look at. Can you go back out tonight at 6 or tomorrow morning at 11? I am either, every time I meet with Madeline, we are either setting the next appointment. That's how you create urgency, right? We're pushing in a very positive way, not like a mean pushing, like we're keeping them moving through the pipeline. Or I'm signing them. Madeline is either writing an offer or she's back on my calendar. So I love that question got asked because that is, we are setting or signing. There's never an appointment that I leave that we've not set the next appointment. That could be for a showing or we've signed a document, a buyer agency agreement document, or we're writing an offer. Those are the 2 options if we're going to increase buyer urgency. So we do have a QR code up here. We are launching the Mega Buyer Agent on January 26th. It is a 6-week program. Investment is $198. And that content is updated every time we run this. So we do up-to-date market of the moment conversations. So we're super excited about it. Take a picture of the QR code, get registered, and you'll be stuck with Madeline and I for 6 weeks then, which is fun. We have a good time. Does anybody else have any last minute questions or any ahas that they want to share? Is there a guide or something that we can print out? So you will get a recording of this. Anybody that registered for this will get a recording. And so that will include all of the slide deck for this. So you should have it. And then the Mega Buyer Agent, when you are there, you get workbooks and they have those conversation templates all typed out for you. So you can practice them, role play them, and share them with your teams. So Jackie, I want my motivation to meet your motivation. So I love that that's your aha. So I hope everybody has happy holidays and we will see you guys soon. Have a good day.